Hey now, and welcome to episode 54 of the Help Find the Others podcast. If you've been here all along, welcome back. If this is your first time listening to us, well then welcome. I'm your host, Ruben, and as always, Stan is on the line as well. How you doing tonight, brother?
Doing good, man. Yourself?
I'm doing great, man. So, this episode was with Charlotte, and she reached out. She's been listening to the podcast for a while and been a member of our Discord, and she wanted to come on. She just published a book that revolves around a story involving plant medicine. I don't know. I mean, it sounded pretty awesome. I guess she didn't want to give away too much of the book, but it sounded pretty good to me. What do you think about the idea of her book?
Yeah. No, it was cool, and like she said, was she wanted to go to the fiction route because of how much nonfiction there is.
Yeah.
About these topics, and those nonfiction books can definitely be dense.
Yeah.
So it was it's refreshing to hear her own story, it's not her story, but it was cool because there definitely are parallels to her story and the book and the character in the book. But I think it was a great approach on introducing this to different demographics that wouldn't approach a nonfiction book about it.
Yeah. No, I thought the book sounds great, and I thought we had a great talk about addiction and psychedelics, and I thought this was a really good episode, and I hope you guys enjoy Charlotte. So thanks, Charlotte, for coming on and reaching out, and you said you've been listening for a while, so thanks for your support there and everything. But how you doing so far with all this stuff going on right now?
I think I'm doing pretty good, all things considered. So I really appreciate you guys having me on the show. Awesome.
Great. So when we talked earlier, we talked about a lot of different things that we can get into. One of the more interesting things you got going on is you recently published a book that is a fiction tale, I think you said, and that it involves a story involving plant medicine. So why don't you give us a little synopsis of what your book is?
Sure. So yeah, I've brought it right here for you guys to see. It's called Cactus Friends, a Psychedelic Love Story, and it's a adventure romance, has some metaphysical and paranormal things in it as well, but it centers around a photographer who's searching for meaning in her life, and she stumbles upon a group in Florida doing Wachuma and Ayahuasca ceremonies, and she decides to go to the Wachuma ceremony to kind of like find clarity in her life and improve her art. And instead of finding clarity, she kind of finds a mystery and receives a message from the Wachuma I don't want to give away too much in the book, but she receives she receives a message that's kind of like an instruction to her. And so then the story takes off from there. And so I wrote it because when I was starting to consider if these plant medicine ceremonies might be a good option for me, I was looking for resources and books on this. And there's a lot of nonfiction books, but I really couldn't find any fiction books. And so the idea had been kicking around in my head. And then I finally actually did go to a Wachuma ceremony and ayahuasca ceremony and, a couple different ceremonies with this local group that I found, and ended up kind of getting a message from the universe myself that inspired me to write the story. Like I kind of just got a download. I call it like a divine download of the book. and it was kind of laid out for me. And I was like, whoa, I have to write this novel. And so I did. And it's been
Yeah.
an amazing journey in so many different ways. And then writing the novel got me into doing more research about, kind of the science and the brain chemistry behind how these compounds were working. And I had been in recovery from alcoholism myself. I'm a recovered alcoholic. And so throughout that process, too, I started trying to share my knowledge with others and found like a kind of a recovery community that was experimenting with these compounds. And so brought that into my life as well. So it's been a really incredible journey for me. And now I'm so happy that the book is out and I can share it with the world. And the book is not about recovery. It's a novel, but through my own experiences, I've come to really become a part of these communities. And I formed a group for alcoholics who are interested in learning about entheogens and sharing information about plant medicine in recovery. So that's my spiel.
Yeah. No, it's awesome. So, when you said that you got a download, was it just kind of the rough idea of the book, or were you kind of writing it in like a flow state where like everything was kind of coming to you?
So so it kind of came to me in two parts. In one ceremony, I'll just tell a little bit more about the novel. So in the novel, what happens is she sees a name of this person that she used to know, and she can't figure out, why she saw this name in her vision. So this happened to me. I saw the name of this man that I had known very well years ago, and then we had drifted apart. And so it was like spinning around in my head. I should, like, what did that mean? I don't understand. Finally contacted him, and he was in the hospital from a serious car accident, had almost died. And the car accident had been the night of the plant medicine ceremony that I had done where I saw his name.
Wow.
So I got totally spooked. And this was like my very first ceremony. So I was like, whoa, what's happening? I wasn't big on, I don't know. I still don't know if it's a coincidence or whatever you want to call it. Anyway, so that was kicking around with me. I was trying to figure out why this had happened. And then I did a smaller mushroom ceremony probably about like 2 months after that. And I was kind of like, can you give me clarity on what all of this means and what plant medicine is supposed to be in my life? And am I supposed to be doing this? And that was when, during that ceremony, I kind of got, when the movie just plays and while your eyes are closed, and the movie of the book basically played out, or like some of the key scenes in the book just like played out in that vision really strongly and clearly. And as soon as the ceremony was over, I started taking notes, and that became the basis of the book.
Wow.
So yeah, I don't know if it'll ever happen again to me.
Yeah.
Where these ideas just like come like that.
Yeah.
Um, but it it's always a profound experience whenever you kind of go deep with a lot of intention with plant medicine or psychedelics, or I don't know, however people want to call these things, entheogens. Um, but at the same time, you can't ever repeat exactly what happened
Hmm.
one time. The information is always different and
Yeah.
the experience is always different. And
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you can always pick up the phone, but whether or not, the same person's on the line every time is up to chance, I guess. Yeah. I I've always tried to get creative inspiration from plant medicines and mushrooms and everything. And I do find the creativity comes later, like it opens me up more to get into a creative, flow state and tap into the muse without the medicine, but during the actual experience, like I don't know, like I'm in my music room here, like I can come down here and I have like every instrument down here and I can create and record whenever I want. And I've tried to do it, like on mushrooms. I've gotten like I need to go like make music, and the times I have, it's been like, and then I've listened back to it. It's awful, and like my guitar was out of tune the whole time, or something like that. And then I've also had other times where I've come down and like I turn everything on and I get really freaked out by the electricity, and then I'm like, I'm gonna burn something, or I'm gonna start a fire. I need to turn all this stuff off. So I've never really experienced that like total in the psychedelic moment, download, of creativity. So it's really awesome that you got that, and you got to, you followed through on it. You did the work, you didn't just go, oh, that was a great idea, and then leave it at that. You did the work to make it a reality. And I mean, that's just awesome.
Yeah, I felt very compelled. And I mean, from what people are telling me, they are enjoying the book and people like it so far, and it's entertaining. But yeah, I just felt absolutely compelled after those ceremonies and just wrote it pretty fast. But I think it's different for different mediums. It's not like I was doing the actual writing during the ceremony. And yeah, music, I mean, maybe, I don't know, do melodies come to you that you then remember later and can play later when you have like more dexterity and
Well, but that's what I mean, is like they sound awesome at the time, and then it's like I got to record this, and I'll record it somehow, and then listen back, and it's just sounds like yelling or something, but yeah, no,
like I want to hear that.
I I get a lot more like ideas and stuff for like ranting and like a video or a podcast from it than music. Maybe I'm more of a music poser than I think. I don't know, but so like when you say you wrote the book fast, like how long was the process?
I think like the first draft to the book, I definitely wrote in under a month.
Oh wow.
Oh
And then,
wow.
the editing and the publishing and the figuring out when it's going to be released and the cover and all that stuff, that takes way longer. But the actual first draft of the book, I wrote really fast. And just writing every single day, just feeling like I have to get this out. I've been given some kind of gift. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Elizabeth Gilbert. She always talks about like big magic, where, as creative people, we can like kind of tap into these flows or, this like universal field and then get these ideas. But if you let go of them or you don't act on them, then kind of somebody else will come and pick them up, or they'll just go back into the ether or whatever. And so that was in my mind a lot. And I was just like, I have to do this. This plant has given me these ideas and I have to kind of respect the vision. And now I've written a sequel to the book and I'm trying to write a third, and those are coming much more difficult. It's much more difficult to pull those out. I've been trying to kind of like replicate the process just with meditation or with like microdoses here and there, but it's not the same as that. For me, is that like blast of creative energy you get from drinking ayahuasca, or I get from drinking ayahuasca.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
taking like a mushroom dose in a certain kind of setting.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I know people say with microdosing that people, in Silicon Valley and stuff like that take it for inspiration and stuff like that, but I don't find um as much inspiration as I do like motivation, like if I already have the inspiration but I don't have the motivation to do anything about it, I find microdosing can help with that component. But I don't find myself much more creative than normal with microdosing. So I could definitely see your experience there. I do think that yeah, like you said, the well, I haven't done ayahuasca, but you do kind of have to like kind of open yourself up to your higher spirit to really invite that muse in. I feel like to really spark creativity like that. But I don't know. Everything's different for everybody. I mean, I'm sure there's some people that are like, oh, I write the best stuff on while I'm microdosing. But I agree that my experience hasn't been a increase in creativity.
Well, I think that productivity is something too, because I look back and, I have been writing for a long time. I've written many reports for different jobs. I've written nonfiction stuff that's been published and short articles and things like this. I had written a longer book in a different genre before this book. And I thought that I needed like alcohol to write. I was one of those people that would drink like a bottle of wine while I was writing, or be like, having a few beers while I was writing. Just had that whole idea of that, like, drinking writer brooding over their work. And that other book never got published. I was never as like motivated to finish it. I was never as motivated to send it out into the world. And so I partially also credit, getting sober, getting into entheogens, getting into meditation, getting into these like more positive habits that do help with productivity and do help with just like overall happiness.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you're not happy, it's hard to get stuff done. But when you kind of have like calm in your life and you're doing good, and then it's easier to actually execute the ideas and like do all the little steps that you have to do that aren't as fun as just making the creative work. So I'll give psychedelics a lot of credit in that department too.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I think the key to all that stuff is clearing out the stuff that's getting in the way, and psychedelics, whether microdose or larger dose, definitely help do that. I think meditation helps do that, exercise, it's there's so much stuff that the more and more I think about like how the brain works, the more it is like a computer. And when we talk about simulation theory and all that, it's like um the whole kind of idea of like defrag, for a hard drive, um to make the computer work better. And it's like I think a lot of the consciousness raising, being in the moment, awareness type of stuff, that's what it does, is it gets rid of all the stupid shit you're worrying about that gets in the way of you doing the things you want to do, or creative things. So I definitely see that for sure.
It's very true. And I I also, just prior to, I guess just right after I finished, I'm trying to like backtrack in time. I also smoked Bufo during this process too. And that is like the ultimate mind clearer. Like that one is total reset
Mm-hmm.
and just, yeah, a really good defrag. And I feel like after that, I have been able to meditate in a way that was not able to before. And so I incorporate that into my creative practice. If I'm ever blocked or I feel like I just don't feel like doing stuff, or I just can't get like the right idea, then I will lay down and put on like insight timer or something, some kind of guided YouTube meditation or something, or those theta wave meditations, and just take like an hour. And that also I feel like is a good defrag, because you can't always use psychedelics. You may not have access to them. You can't always, you may have kids at home. It's COVID quarantine. So that's like my defrag when I
Yeah.
need it, but can't do a ceremony or can't travel or go anywhere.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And Bufo is the toad venom, right?
Yes.
The
The,
MEO DMT, right?
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I've never done that, but I definitely, hear all the stories about it and everything, and I could definitely see that it kind of changes meditation going forward for sure. I mean, mushrooms have for me, it's like, um, well, actually, I think the first like really good like meditation experience I had was my like solo trip on acid last year, year and a half ago or whatever, and yeah, meditation's been completely different for me since that. It just took that one like kind of totally. Oh, I get it now. It's not just that what I thought it was. It's um, I, I until recently, like, so my wife and I did a 28-day or 21-day meditation challenge, and we've actually continued it since then of meditating every night. That's been the most that I've done it like daily, but it's been at least like 3 or 4 times a week since that acid experience, where I've been like, I need to shut everything down. And I've noticed the biggest change in my life just from that, like in my demeanor and my, temper and everything. And I do, yeah, that's the best analogy I can come up with is a defrag of just like, okay, all that stuff that's bothering me, let it go for 20 minutes and it's a different day afterwards,
I know you talked about this on the podcast before, but how much acid did you take during in that
That
time?
was 150 micrograms. And it was kind of the perfect dose. Like, it had been a while since I had taken it, but like, and I've definitely taken more in my life, but it was at a time where I didn't like take it seriously, and not with intent, and it was just total party time. So with 150 micrograms, taking it seriously, like it was very, very intense, and uh, I think that I could have handled more, but wouldn't have wanted to. I guess if that makes sense, like definitely there might be some people who are like, oh, 150 is a microdose for me. Well, I don't think anyone says that, but still, like,
I'm sure there's someone.
yeah. um, but I know there's people that take 10 strips and stuff like that and whatever. But yeah, no, it was, um, there was a good hour and a half of like full on visuals of like open eye visuals of like fairies, and like my dogs were like smiling and like I mean it was crazy. But yeah, every time I started getting like wigged out, like I was very tied into the weather, and it would be like really sunny and I'd be really happy, and then the clouds would come in and I would get like really depressed and thinking about death and all this stuff. And every time I started like getting down, I went in and meditated with like a guided meditation, and like it was, yeah, it was phenomenal. But
Well,
it definitely like changed my whole perspective on meditation and like what I need to get out of it and what I need to do to get myself to that space.
what was your experience like smoking the toad? Was it just completely mind blowing, or were you kind of prepared for it after your ayahuasca?
Do you want the long version or the short version?
Whatever you want to give.
I will say it was completely mind-blowing and different. It was really unlike anything I've ever experienced. Bufo is so I'll just set it up a little bit.
Hmm?
So I got a phone call from someone that I knew like 2 days before saying, hey, we're going to have a Bufo ceremony somewhere else, but the location fell through. Now it's going to be really close to you, and we're going to have the shaman here from Mexico a couple extra days. On one of the extra days, do you and your partner want to join for the ceremony? Just the three of us. And I was like, okay, yeah, sure, I guess. Like, how do I turn this down? But it was literally going to be like, in 24 hours. So I
Oh
didn't have
wow.
too much. Yeah, I didn't have. But then again, I thought, when else is this going to come to me? Like, I'm never hearing of this around. Like, usually you have to travel to do something, or a lot of people have to travel, or you might be experimenting on your own. So I was like, okay, I have the opportunity to do it with someone knowledgeable in a safe environment. I guess I'm going to go ahead and take this opportunity. And the location where we did the ceremony had a pool, a really large saltwater heated pool. And so the shaman was like, first of all, he was like, don't even call me a shaman. I'm just a Bufo facilitator. You guys can be your own shamans. I'm just here to, guide you and keep you safe. But he was like, if it's okay with you, I'd really like to do it in the water so you'll be weightless. So, because some people flail around, but we'll be here to hold you and it'll be better than if you just do it on the ground. And I know that's not really a common Bufo practice. Like a lot of facilitators will try to keep you standing up, or some will want you just totally on a couch or on a bed or something safe. But this particular facilitator was like, we're going to do this in water. You're going to be weightless. It's going to be like a birth. And that is what it felt like. I mean, it felt like I don't know if you guys have seen the movie Enter the Void. Have you seen that film?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Where he like comes out of the birth canal and there's
Yeah.
just like, it was basically that. Plus, like, that's what it felt like visually. Plus, like, the most like joy, love, connectedness. My body no longer existed. I was just in this universal realm of love and understanding and logic, and it felt extremely primal. And I had a lot of red, but I was also just somewhere else. Like my entity was there, but everything else was gone. And I just felt very content. And my partner commented that we both felt like we were being born and getting married at the same time. It was that level of like, being born, watching your child's birth, getting married. Like it was that level of human experience that you won't forget, I guess, is what I'm saying. And then when we came to, because you kind of completely go away. And then slowly I started hearing like the songs that the Bufo shaman was singing, because he was singing some Ikro type songs as he held me in the water like a baby, and slowly I started hearing those kind of songs come in. And then there was about another hour where it was just kind of almost like felt like a microdose experience, like everything's glistening, everything's looks beautiful. And then I could have driven home after that, like I was 100% back to normal, but just really, content and relaxed. And I think that feeling lasted for a very long time. Like maybe it hasn't even left. And that was, over a year ago. So I have not been called to do it again because frankly, I think it was such an amazing experience my first time, and just with people that I knew really well, and in this beautiful, at this person's house, it was just really beautiful. And in this pool that I've had the opportunity a couple times since, and I've just turned it down because I'm like, nothing can top that first time. I don't even want to, I don't even want to mess with the experience. But I know some people, I think it also has to do with the dosage as well. I think you really need to be with somebody who doesn't give you too much. Because the experiences that I've heard where people have had negative Bufo experiences, they were taking above the recommended dosage. So I think it's like 60 to 100 milligrams is good. And then above that, you're really like pushing into different territory. Mm-hmm. So I've heard of people having, one person that I know in my community described it as going through the hell realms on an infinite repeat. And he said he felt like he was in it for 8 hours in like pure hell. And so I guess it also depends, they say like psychedelics will bring out like what you have inside you. So maybe if you're going through something or just take too much. And I do see people who have those experiences where they really like flail around. I don't know if you guys have watched the Vice documentaries.
Yeah.
Or like, there's rumors that some of the people doing Bufo will like shock you with like little tasers to try to keep you like upright so you have like a different kind of experience. So I didn't and
I can't
I'm not
imagine that's
interested in
good.
that. So I don't know if my experience was that typical, but I do know people that do it more regularly that are doing it, once a month because they feel
Yeah.
like that just makes them feel so healthy
Yeah.
every time after they do Bufo. And I hear it's, really great for depression if you suffer from depression. Um, properly done Bufo ceremony can really like lift you out of it. But I think it is really, really different from just smoking DMT. It's not as visual and it's more like mental and emotional,
Mm-hmm.
if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, I think too. I mean, you had kind of an ideal setting, too.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
and it sounds like you went in without many expectations, which that's the part of the set that like people get wrong a lot. It's like you're expecting one thing, and then if it goes south, you're like, no, I don't want this, and you don't roll with it, and whatever. So I think just being accepting of the experience, and then definitely having a guide too. Like, I mean, that's um I think especially with DMT that can just be so overwhelming. Like, uh yeah, having a guide helps, even if they're not doing much, if they're just there, just their presence, I think can help. um
Yeah, and
but
it's the situation where like, they have to really like make you smoke more to have
mhm,
the desired effect because as you take like the first, you're kind of scared because I think everybody is kind of scared the first time they do it because you're gonna completely like be removed from your body basically. And so maybe not everybody, but I think there's some apprehension there of like you don't want to do smoke too much by accident or like you're a little shy. And then, the first hit is like so much effect already, things start warping. You need somebody there to make you finish, or at least like somebody
yeah,
like me.
yeah.
You
Yeah,
need somebody
yeah,
there to like hold the pipe to make you finish so that you actually go
yeah,
into that other realm
yeah,
and can kind of blast through.
yeah.
So,
I think that's Joe Rogan says that a lot when he's talking to people about smoking DMT. Is he's like, when people are like, oh, I had this bad time, he's like, well, did you take the third hit? Because it's like you kind of get stuck in like limbo if you don't. But
yeah. And I think for Bufo, it's not necessarily three. It's just you either need one that's big enough or you need two, like
mhm,
really fast back to back.
mhm,
That's going to be enough to kind of send you off.
yeah,
And then there's no stopping it after you start.
yeah,
It's just you're off to the races.
yeah. It's so crazy. I mean, it's crazy enough that there's mushrooms that grow out of the ground that have the effect they have on us, and plants and stuff like that. But then it's so crazy too that there's a frog that its venom sacs, if you dry it on a piece of glass, has that experience. I mean, it's just nuts. Where there's other frogs that, if you did the same thing to them, it would kill you. You know, like it's so weird. Um, have you heard uh any stories with or interviews with Mike Tyson talking about his toad experiences?
Yeah, and actually the person that facilitates Mike Tyson, I my partner has, gone to him for the Bufo after this experience. Um, but I have not taken that opportunity yet just because again, my first one was so amazing.
Mm,
But
Mm-hmm.
people keep telling me, oh, you should watch the full like Mike Tyson talking about it because then you'll probably want to take
yeah.
advantage of the opportunity to do it. But there's a lot of controversy around the person that he uses. So
Oh,
I
really?
don't want to spread rumors, but
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, if you Google it, there's people with really radically different opinions. Like some people think he's a monster.
Huh.
Some people think he's doing great stuff with Bufo. So he's a really controversial figure in that community. And I mean, the whole practice with Bufo is also, some people are very against it because they think it endangers the frogs. And even for me, I think it's something that should be used really rarely and for very special occasions because it is so special from these animals and it is hard to milk and it is hard to find these frogs and they are in limited supply. And so even the facilitator that I did the Bufo with, he said he wants to move to just using synthetic Bufo because it's just kinder for the animals. And, you know, the more Western demand there is for the Bufo, the more people start doing inhumane things to sell it and get more and more and more and more and more from the frogs. So I feel lucky that I got to experience it, but I think it's also something that has like a fine ecological line with that particular psychedelic.
Yeah.
And you know, some people are purists. They're like, there's an idea that okay, you know, we have to use real ayahuasca. We have to use the vine straight from the Amazon, or we have to use the bufo straight from the toad. And then there's other people who think, well, if we can create this synthetically in a lab and it does the exact same thing, why wouldn't we let the vine keep growing and just use the one that we've made?
Yeah.
And I mean, we obviously can't make the exact same thing, but we can get a pretty good approximation. So I guess that's just, you know, something else that's up for debate in the community, and people have to decide for themselves if they want to um, use the compound that's growing in nature or produced in nature, or if they are, you know, open to accepting a substitute in order to maybe have like less environmental impact.
Yeah. I actually I read that the Banisterius capi vine that's used in ayahuasca because of the increase in you know, not only people going to the rainforest to have ceremonies, but the amount of people buying the dried vine online to make their own. I read that it's actually, you know, that mixed with like the destruction of the rainforest just in general from logging and agriculture, that actually that you know that vine is on its way to being an endangered species. You know, and I hope that's not true, or I hope someone's intervening and, you know, they're replanting as much as they're using, because like, I mean, that would be a true uh tragedy ecologically if, you know, um an ancient teacher like that is gone because of our, you know, overconsumption. That would be pretty awful, you know.
Yeah, and it grows really slow. But I mean, the Amazon is a huge
Yeah.
landmass.
Yeah.
But but sometimes I do think, man, it seems like every person I talk to is like going to an ayahuasca ceremony or hosting an
Yeah.
ayahuasca ceremony or flying somewhere to go to an ayahuasca ceremony. And it's like, how much ayahuasca is there if it's just like, you know, all these people I'm talking to from different states are trying this,
Yeah.
and there must be like so many more people in Europe and uh, Canada and Mexico, like all over the world, participating in these ceremonies, Brazil. So you
Hmm.
do wonder, like, what kind of supply, what kind of supply is left. And I hear, from what I read, peyote is also in that in that situation,
Hmm.
even more extremely right now. And like uh, the more construction and building that's done in the Southwest, the less peyote there is.
Yeah.
So that's an even scarcer and very, very slow growing
Yeah. I
plant.
mean,
And if it's not harvested correctly, then it dies. And
yeah. Yeah, I think like most, yeah, I think it takes like 40 years or something for the cactus to grow to produce the flowers. So that is, you know, uh that's an issue. The trees that they make saffron out of to make MDMA, the precursor for that, like those are endangered. I mean, and there is, you know, the psychedelic plant medicine community also needs to like kind of take stock of their ecological impact as well,
Yeah, and I mean, I think some people are like, I think a lot of people are doing, I mean, I know some people doing ceremonies with like lab ayahuasca, but it's people don't want it, the people going to these ceremonies don't like that idea. They they want actual the actual ayahuasca. And I think the Wachuma is a little more sustainable. I think it's from what I understand, there's more of it. It's easier to grow. You can harvest it sooner, and you can harvest it in a way where you can cut off like one stalk and the other stalk of the plant is still growing. But it's funny because I don't even see that as much. I would say that's the one I see the least or hear about people doing the least is like the Wachuma, the Peruvian torch. And I think that's just because it's kind of unpleasant to consume, and it takes, it tastes bad. It takes like a really long time. It lasts a really long time. I don't know. I just don't see that. That doesn't seem to have the popularity of these other substances, even though it's a really powerful psychedelic and like really, I did the Wachuma ceremony I had a really amazing and profound ceremony. So I talk about that a lot in the book, actually. It kicks off with a Wachuma ceremony. I don't know if you guys have tried Wachuma or San Pedro is another name.
I've done peyote and that was it. But Wachuma and San Pedro, they're both mescaline too, right? Like, or is it a different alkaloid?
It's mescaline, and then there's some other compounds in there that are slightly different from peyote, that are in like the fruit of the cactus that impact it. But yeah, it's mescaline.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to actually, like, I wish I lived in a climate that you could, because I heard, they grow a lot quicker, like you said, and like it's pretty easy to get San Pedro and Peruvian torch seeds and just grow it yourself. So like I would like to do that. I do remember when I was looking into it, and I think they stopped it now, but on eBay, like they sold like the powdered San Pedro and Peruvian torch. But did they take it
You
off?
could even buy the plants at Home Depot. I think up until like 2 years ago, you could go and buy a Wachuma at Home Depot.
That's crazy.
But I don't know. I haven't tried to buy it online. Well, and I mean, when I was in college, we bought a lot of stuff that we can't buy anymore, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. They like caught on to us. But like morning glory seeds, can you still buy morning glory seeds?
Yeah. Oh,
yeah, that you can.
Yeah. And salvia, I don't know. Can you still buy salvia just anywhere?
No.
Or at head shops?
No, that they really put, once people started putting up YouTube videos of them freaking out, that they put a stop on that. Because I mean, they used to sell that here up until like 10 years ago. They sold the 10x 20x extracts at like smoke shops, but you can't even get seeds, or like you can't even grow it, like it's not just that they don't sell it in the stores anymore, but like you can't even order to most states. Like some states I think you do, and I don't know too much about what states it's legal or not, but I know, like, I tried looking up, like, I'll just grow some of it as a house plant, and like you can't even order any of that. Like you need like some underground person to send you cuttings and stuff like that. So
the plant police will come after you.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, meanwhile, I can order 5 cases of grain alcohol and say it's a hand sanitizer, and that's fine. But like but yeah, the plants now, But I don't know. That's the world we live in, I guess.
For now, hopefully changing.
Yeah.
At least changing in some states.
Yeah.
So I think slowly.
Yeah. So, you touched on psychedelics helping you overcome addiction and alcoholism. Do you want to talk about that at all, and like what your journey was there?
Oh yeah, let's talk about that. So, as I said, I have a secret group. Um, it's like secret to access, but it's for, I guess, if anybody's really interested and that's listening to this show, I say secret so we can keep it like anonymous and the people in it are protected. But if anybody is really interested listening to this, you guys can go on my website and like send me a private message about it, and I will check. I do check those messages, and I will get back to somebody if they need help in this area and they want to find out more. But yeah, it's to share information on entheogens and talk about how they've impacted us in recovery. And it kind of all stemmed from, or like my mixing them together, kind of all stemmed from another podcast actually called Recovery Elevator. I don't know if you guys know this show. I don't think it's a pretty, it's really popular in the recovery community, but outside of that, I don't think most people would have listened to it. But there's the man that does that show, his name is Paul Churchill, and he runs these online recovery groups for people that didn't necessarily find a home with AA. So like AA, for me personally, AA never really resonated. I never went to AA meetings. I didn't want, I don't know, I had resistance just from anti-religious stuff. And growing up, I was a little bit resistant to trying that model. It just never felt like the right fit to me. So I found these other groups through this podcast that this guy was doing. And he had been going to REUPLOADED, which is this ayahuasca center in Costa Rica. And a lot of the members in this recovery community had been going to this place, REUPLOADED, to try and work on their addiction issues after this host had gone. And we kind of just all got together, and we're talking more. And the more that I heard people's stories and the more that I watched, I watched like all the documentaries I could watch about it. And REUPLOADED is unfortunately a really expensive experience. It's not accessible for that many people. I think it's like $7,000 for 1 week. And you do a bunch of ayahuasca ceremonies combined with other therapeutics. So I was kind of like, you know what, this is out of reach for me. I can't go by myself on a vacation, fly somewhere and spend so much money just in a really short time on myself, like almost $10,000. I was like, that's just not going to happen. But I just kind of kept my ear to the ground as I was trying to stay sober and like early on in my sobriety. And, it's like the energy that when you're putting something out, it sometimes like attracts stuff back. And the more that I was thinking about it and talking about it to people, I started getting opportunities to incorporate that plant medicine into my own local community, and got connected with a ceremony that was being run by a recovered addict. And a lot of recovered addicts were attending the ceremony, and a lot of recovered crack addicts, actually, crack addicts, opioid addicts. And, I live in South Florida, and we've been called like the rehab capital of America. And there's, it's an environment like Palm Springs in California where they're like, oh, let me go to rehab in the sunshine by the beach. So even though people think of it as like spring break, like party central, there's a lot of sober people in South Florida because there's so many people that come to rehab here and just stay. Or there's a lot of people that are trying to get sober and they're in some kind of like sobriety program. And so I had tried, when I was trying to quit drinking, I had tried pretty much everything. I had tried microdosing mushrooms. I had tried taking LSD. And these methods did not work for me. I I mean, whether it was just like not the right time, like I'm sure they might work for somebody, but they didn't. The mushrooms and the LSD did not work for me to help me quit drinking. I think like the first time I tried to microdose the mushrooms, as soon as I was done, I drank like an entire bottle of champagne. Like it just was not, it was not helping me. But what really did help me, I think, stay sober was getting into that community with other people, doing the plant medicine in a group, talking about our experiences, having that connection, and also having a guide and a leader, and even the shaman that they would bring they'd bring a shaman from Colombia, and even he would speak often to addiction. And so at the end of the ceremonies, he would talk about, why you want to keep your vibration high, or like why you want to stay in this elevated state and you don't want to ingest things that will bring you back down, or that are depressants, or that are actually like neurotoxins, because alcohol at the end of the day is really a neurotoxin. It has really negative effects on our brain overall. It doesn't, if you drink enough alcohol long enough, you will basically become addicted. And not only that, but it limits the dopamine pathways in your brain. It limits the neuroreceptors in your brain. It makes problem solving more difficult. And I know people don't want to hear about this in COVID because a lot of people are drinking a lot of alcohol.
Yeah.
And I don't want to be that person that's like proselytizing. Like alcohol has a place in many people's lives. It got me through some tough times, but you can't look at something like ayahuasca or Bufo and compare it in any way to alcohol, because the ayahuasca has shown to actually like regrow parts of your brain, increase the amount of serotonin that's in your brain, help people. They did studies in Brazil where the people in the ayahuasca community over time, they improved their like math test scores and all these different like focus elements. And literally the exact opposite happens over heavy alcohol use over the years. So I think between quitting drinking and incorporating these habits into my life, I compared it to like a nerve coming back online. And I had had a lot of back trouble as well, especially like when I was doing when I was drinking heavily. One of the common side effects for women, especially in their 30s who drink a lot, is that your discs in your spine kind of get dehydrated. The alcohol really dehydrates the discs in your spine. So you can have a lot of disc injuries like herniations and ruptured discs. And so I kept rupturing the discs in my back. And when you herniate a disc, I had back surgery and discectomy, but when you herniate a disc, it like flattens the nerve in between your two in between the two pieces of your spine and your bones. And then after they repair the disc, the doctors will tell you, well, the nerve will slowly expand, but it's going to take like a year. So over the year, you'll feel like all these weird sensations, like feelings will return to your like legs if the nerve was so crushed. So I experienced this with my back, and I felt like it was the same the first year that I was sober and the first year that I spent doing this plant medicine. It was like my brain went from 2G to I don't want to say 5G because now people think that sounds bad, but I'll just say it was like I went from dial up to full bars on my Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
From, just from like cutting out the bad stuff that was really messing with my brain chemistry, and just keeping me in these like hangovers and ups and downs, and then bringing in this like good stuff periodically, not too frequently, maybe once a month, every other month, and in this community setting. I think that's, really important too. There's a big saying in the recovery community, the opposite of addiction is connection. So I think like having a group that you can talk about this kind of stuff, and experience it with other people who are also trying to stay sober, who aren't trying to party, who are like really serious about improving their health with psychedelics and not just like having a party or something. I think it really did a lot for me. So that's why I've been, trying to share this with other people in a safe way. And we basically just have people come in word of mouth or people they meet. And it's kind of touchy because AA and these communities, they look down on any kind of drug use. And, for
Yeah.
some addicts, like this is not for everyone. I tell everyone I'm not a doctor. I'm a just a lady who likes to write and share information. But some addicts can't handle doing any other mind altering substances. They can't bring that into their life. But I'm not addicted to ayahuasca. I was addicted to alcohol. So it's like if you can manage to ingest these substances without causing yourself to relapse, then I think it can be really beneficial. Or if I really hope one day that this will become legal and it will be a situation where people can go to a rehab and have this incorporated in their addiction therapy. And I know this is starting some with ketamine and psilocybin, but from what and MDMA too. But I really just think, especially ayahuasca, I think it has a lot of potential, and Bufo really. I think it has a lot of potential to help addicts and to help people who have. I mean, we've seen a lot of documentation of people with PTSD and depression as well. So I think those things like addiction, depression, um, ADHD, it's supposed to improve outcomes for people with ADHD, anxiety. Like there's just so many things. And the more research we can do and the more people that had these experiences and can share the results, I think the better off the world will be. So that's why I like to talk about it too. Because I'm like, people need to know. Because so many, I'm sure there's hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people right now trying to quit drinking and they've never heard of any of this. And they've never thought, okay, maybe taking this like plant psychedelic one night is going to help me stay sober for years.
Yeah.
And it does. It helps people. It doesn't help everybody. There's people that, doesn't help everybody, but I think it helps more than it doesn't help, as long as people are taking it responsibly, like you said, in the right setting.
Yeah. It's interesting too that the standard AA crowd, 12 steppers and stuff like that they're so opposed to the idea of people handling their addictions with psychedelics, because if I mean, I may not have the story completely correct, but I believe the guy that started AA either originally wanted to incorporate LSD or came up with the idea on LSD. Is that correct?
Yep, that's correct.
Yeah. Yeah. And then
The founder of AA, Bill Wilson, he came up with the 12 steps while he was tripping.
yeah. Yeah. And it's like, yeah, if you try to tell that to
Makes
someone, they'd be
sense
like,
to me.
Yeah.
But I mean, and it's so funny, and I understand the idea of someone that's like, say you were a crack addict and you're like, man, if I even smoke a joint, I'm gonna end up smoking crack. It'll trigger all that and everything. And I get that. But I have not heard one story of someone who's like, well, I did ayahuasca and then immediately left and went and smoked crack. Like that, like I've never heard that story. And
No.
so, I understand where someone could think that, because with other drugs or triggers for other drugs, but it's like there isn't any story I can come up with of that happening where it was a trigger. Maybe there's people that it didn't stop their addiction, but as far as it being a trigger and they go into a relapse because they tried to use ayahuasca to get off of uh, some sort of other drug, uh, that just isn't there. So that's just like kind of a false assumption that it's going to be a trigger, and I mean, I don't know how much you've read about like the iboga treatment, like in Canada and stuff like that for
Oh
opiate
yeah.
addicts. But that seems to have an astounding success rate, and again, it's like, I think the people that are going to do that, it's like, it's not going to be a trigger because like you're not going to be able to do it while you're there. It might just not work, and you don't stop being an addict, but that doesn't mean it's a trigger, and
Mhm.
and so it's like, um, I think to be afraid of like things triggering you, you would already need to have somewhat, you know, beaten it a little bit. Otherwise, like, I think when you're going to use these psychedelics, it's like, for a lot of people, it's almost a last ditch. Like, I can't stop doing, drugs or alcohol. And like, this is like, I got to try this because it seems to have a good success. But that seems to be the thing though, that all the 12 steppers are like, oh, well, you're just doing drugs. That's going to be a trigger, and it's like, this is something different. Like, yes, they're drugs. Yes, they are chemical that reacts with your brain, but it's like there's so much more to it. There's something different to it. And I agree with you that, I hope, much like using these medicines for treatment for anxiety and depression, I hope it does become an accepted tool to be used to battle addiction, because if, like I said, I'm sure there's people out there that have, it didn't do anything for them, but it doesn't seem to make the situation worse, at least.
Yeah, and I will add the caveat that like you do need a little bit of sober time under your belt before you go and do this. But I think, sometimes people can what they call white knuckling it, in early sobriety where you're really using like all your willpower and it's more of it feels like a diet. You're like not eating cookies right now, but one day you're going to eat cookies again. And you got this mentality, except you have it with alcohol or heroin or cocaine or whatever substance you're addicted to. And I think if you can even get a couple weeks in that white knuckling it period where you're just like hanging on from willpower alone, because that won't last you a year, but that will last you a couple weeks. So that is the window of time when I think these treatments can be and these experiences can be most beneficial. It's to get you out of that mind frame where you're relying all on your willpower and like get you to the point where you're embracing a new reality and your sobriety feels like a gift from the universe and you're so happy to be like fully awake and not numbing yourself down with
Hmm.
addiction.
Yeah.
So, and it's funny because, AA's whole thing is the first step is, you have to surrender. And ironically, I think like ayahuasca can help a lot of people surrender.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
might be
Exactly.
struggling with that before. You're supposed to surrender to a higher power. And for some people, that idea of like grandmother ayahuasca, you have those profound religious entheogenic experience, you're surrendering to a higher power, and then you can proceed on and work on your underlying issues that might be causing your addiction, or at least can get some more time, because the longer you can get away from the last drink you had or the last time you used, the longer you can go, the higher your chances are that you'll stay sober.
Hmm.
So somebody that's been sober for a year has a higher chance of staying sober indefinitely than somebody who's been sober for a week.
Yeah.
So it's just, these things can help push you past that point, I think.
Yeah.
So I see, I'm very hopeful
Yeah.
that it can help people.
Now, do you think ayahuasca helped you beat the addiction, or just have a distaste for alcohol? Like, like, are you afraid that if you drank a beer at someone's house, that all of a sudden you'd be an alcoholic again? Like, do you think that ayahuasca is just giving you the strength to just never even get to that step of drinking that beer?
I've thought about this a lot because I I think some people go into it thinking if I drink ayahuasca or I take ibogaine, it will cure me from being an addict and I'll be able to moderate like a normal person.
Hmm.
And I am too afraid to take that chance.
Right.
Like, I just don't want to go back to where I was when I was drinking.
Mm-hmm.
But for all I know, maybe I could just moderate now and my brain has changed that much because I do feel like a profound shift has happened. I just used to crave alcohol like every single night. And it sounds terrible to say, but I wanted to, drink wine every single night.
Yeah.
And that feeling is just gone. Like I sometimes think about it and I'm like, how was I even that person?
Yeah.
Like it just seems so distant. And I think it also helped me to have some clarity and resolution on maybe some of the reasons underlying why I wanted to just escape my own brain every single day, So I think, but yeah, I know some people that say they have been able to successfully moderate after they have done these ayahuasca experiences. For me, it's just too much of a gamble, and I feel like
Mm-hmm.
I've got a good thing going now. Why mess it
Right.
up? So,
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I don't blame you. I was just
yeah.
kind of where
But
my
people
thought process.
do. I have definitely like heard that, like, oh, now I can just have one drink, or now
Yeah.
I feel like I'm drinking like a normal person.
Yeah.
Same with, food addiction, I think is a thing too that people report having like a similar experience, like their relationship with food changes after their plant medicine experiences, or maybe some other kind of compulsive behavior that they were doing. I think, I I'm sure over time we'll see more and more studies coming out about positive behavior changes from being in these communities. And I think it really also does have to do with, being in these communities that are focused on health and like mental health and like improving yourself.
Yeah.
It's a good thing, especially for a lot of people who don't have any kind of religion, don't have any kind of civic engagement, just working jobs that they may or may not like. It's good to be a part of a community that's focused on something a little more theoretical and a little more about like increasing knowledge and community and love.
Mm-hmm.
So, like a
Oh yeah.
hippie renaissance, I think is good for everyone.
I agree. I agree. I'm doing my best to be a part of it. That's for sure.
I know you
Uh,
guys are doing so good.
but yeah, I don't know if you listened to our last episode, but our guest had ketamine therapy, and I was listening back to it, and I thought of something that I would have added in, and that's that we were talking about the pharmaceutical industry and the standard treatment of anxiety and depression, and the standard medicine for those things uh, treat those conditions as a disease of the brain. They treat it chemically, which anxiety and depression can be. Um, Much like addiction can be. Obviously, you're, chemically addicted to whatever substance. But there's a larger component of both of those conditions and of addiction that's a disease of the mind. And those are two different things, obviously. Like, the mind is much more complex. We know much less about, and to where we can study chemical imbalances and things in the brain. The study of the mind has been going on since we realized we had consciousness, right? And that's where I think these things are going to be considered medicines. Is these are the mind medicines, and beating the chemical addiction, like you said, takes white knuckling and willpower and stuff like that. But I do think that the addiction can be beaten within the mind. That these ayahuasca or mushrooms or any of this stuff, uh, I think it can cure that disease of the mind, to where um, someone could get to that point of being able to have moderation. Um, like I said, like you said, I wouldn't push it if you don't need to, but I just I know there's some studies about like the genetic link to alcoholism and stuff like that. So I don't want to, undermine the science that there is behind addiction. But I think, a large chunk of the problem with addiction is in the mind. And I really hope that that's what starts, getting researched, and like you said, that, more and more information and data will come out about this, because I think that's the biggest thing with psychedelics is that they are medicine for the mind that we have so far not been able to synthesize, like that's other than synthesizing compounds that we found in plants first. But as far as like just coming up with some new drug, like we haven't been able to do what Mother Nature did with medicine for the mind, and that's where I think psychedelics fit into the addiction treatment arena.
Yeah, and I know before they stopped doing research with LSD, I mean, LSD was showing really promising results for having people in the 70s quit smoking. And then they just stopped those trials. I think there were alcohol trials going on too, and it was having really positive results. And the founder of AA was in one of those government studies. So, and there's a documentary about him that's really good too. It's just called Bill Wilson, and it goes through all of that and how the LSD and how the psychedelics informed him. But yeah, it's a very promising field. I'm gonna make like a weird analogy right now, but I think of addiction as having like three components. And it's kind of like tanning and being out in the sun. So this is like my weird my weird analogy. So like you've got your circumstance. Are you in a situation that's positive or negative? Are you in a situation where you're just getting a lot of exposure? Like let's say you're outside all the time and you're getting a lot of exposure to the sun. Your skin's going to start degrading. Same with alcohol. If you're in a circumstance where you're constantly surrounded by alcohol, your ability to consume less of the alcohol is going to start waning because it's just always around and it's always going to be, like your willpower slowly degrades over time. Then you also have a physiological component where some people are just more susceptible. Say like you have red hair, you're more susceptible to getting sunburnt. There's some people that are just more susceptible to getting addicted to alcohol. They take the first drink and it's like a light bulb has gone off in their mind. And that is the physical, biology. And then the final one is just like kind of choice or like self-medication and that would be like going to a tanning bed and like deliberately trying to like turn your skin brown. You're deliberately seeking out that alcohol to appease some kind of mental desire that you have. So I think I see addiction as like circumstance plus exposure, and like that's like physical exposure, and then like the underlying genetics that you have. If that makes sense. And you can't address the genetic. Well, I mean, and even some say that ayahuasca like changes your brain chemistry. So maybe it's even addressing the genetics, but it's definitely definitely can address the circumstance and the kind of underlying mental conditions or desires.
Yeah. Oh, and I'll even go as far as to add a fourth component to that is a hard thing for people to overcome, and that's the cultural, kind of like peer pressure, whatever. Like there's, say you're like all your friends go out and drink all the time, and you're like, man, they're drinking at the bar, and then I'm drinking every other night too when they're not at the bar. I think I have a problem, but to not go out and drink, there's like that whole kind of thing that can be a component that just feeds off of that, adds to that negative feedback loop. Like I noticed that with myself. I mean, I don't know. I don't know if I would classify myself an alcoholic. Like I talk about how I used to do a lot of psychedelics in high school. Well, I didn't drink. Like I would like be the one with a couple of dudes tripping at a party, but I didn't drink. And I used to like rant about, like how weed's better than alcohol because God made it and whatever, like I used to be that guy at parties. Right. And then once I just kind of like got away and moved away and didn't have those connections, and it just slowly started into like my social stuff was drinking. And so like in college and then playing in bands and hanging out in bars every night, like I just drank all the time. And then I didn't consider it a problem, even though like say I was like working at fast food restaurants and I would like I used to work a closer at Wendy's. And before I went to work, which was like after dinner, I would fill up like or I would bring a thing of gin with me to work, and I would have like Hawaiian punch and gin on like a thing in the back and like be drinking that all day. And but I thought it was just like I'm just getting through work, or whatever. And I would have never labeled myself an alcoholic until um I didn't work a shitty job and I wasn't hanging out at bars every night. And then I found myself, I was still drinking. I wasn't getting drunk, but it was like every night, like 2 glasses of whiskey. And like I noticed I really couldn't even go to sleep until I did that. And so I didn't notice any of that until it stopped. And honestly, what stopped it was mushrooms. And it wasn't my intention. Like I didn't, go like, oh, I'm going to take mushrooms to stop drinking. It was like after I started like experimenting with mushrooms, and this was even before, like I was like hiding it from my wife at this time that I was doing mushrooms, and she brought up like, you haven't bought a bottle of whiskey in a long time, and I was like, yeah, you're right, like I just like stopped. And then once I was aware of it, I was like, I don't even like want it anymore. Um, and now it came back over time as more of an appreciation of whiskey and liquor and like craft beer as a food, but not as a thing to do, not something I needed to go to sleep, not something I even wanted the effect from. It was more from the taste, like it was the foodie, like culinary aspect of it. So I was able to bring it back in what I would consider moderation at that point. I mean, like I'm drinking a White Russian right now, but that's the only drink I'm going to have tonight and whatever. And a lot of that is COVID related. I've definitely increased my alcohol intake just because like what else are you going to do at night? Um, but yeah, like it wasn't my intention, but that was the result of like getting back into mushrooms for the health reasons, like you said, for the betterment of myself and not as a party, not as anything else, but gaining knowledge and improvement, like you said. So I totally, while I never called myself an addict and never had the intention of using psychedelics to stop that addiction or whatever, I definitely can look back and be like, holy shit, okay, well, that really did work for me, and it wasn't even what I was trying to do.
That's awesome, man. Like, hats off. Like, that's so lucky. And I do think you're not the first that I've heard have this experience. I do think it's totally, I think a lot of people do, and it's a great thing and a great side effect. It just makes you lose interest because it's just not as good. You know,
Mm-hmm.
you just start to realize it's just not as good for your body. Your body just doesn't want it.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I have another close friend who has an experience very similar to yours. And I think maybe, if people are at a certain point that where they're getting close to that line of problem drinking, or they're in a gray area where they're like, yeah, maybe I have a little, like maybe I should cut back. They're telling themselves they should cut back. Um, some like light microdosing and mushrooms, I think, is a good thing to introduce
Mm-hmm.
into the mix if you're feeling that, oh, I might be what they call a gray area drinker, somebody that like is drinking more than what the doctors recommend you consume, or you're drinking at that level where you're not an alcoholic, but it's still above, it still puts you at risk for cancer, heart disease, or some other ailment that you wouldn't want, or weight gain, or whatever it is. Then it's also worth people looking at psychedelics as like just a way to offset that a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Again, not a doctor, but it
Yeah.
seems like I hear that anecdotally a lot from people that it and I'll recommend there's another book that's really good that I also read at the beginning of my journey with kind of sobriety and entheogens called This Naked Mind. I don't know if you guys are familiar with this book.
No.
It really focuses on alcohol addiction, but it also goes into a lot of brain chemistry stuff and the science kind of behind why people are moving from, social drinking into gray area drinking as they get older. And then if they continue into problem drinking, and then if they continue into sometimes alcoholism. So I really highly recommend that book, This Naked Mind by Annie Grace, if people want to read more on the alcohol piece of what we're talking about tonight. And if you have an interest in brain chemistry.
Yeah.
Related to addiction and this kind of stuff. Actually, I was going to say too, I had the idea today. I'm going to, for anybody that listens to this podcast is interested, I'm going to put on my website a entheogenic and alcohol reading list. So if they want to find out more on this specific topic, I'll have like a list of different resources that they can go to, of books and articles that I've read myself personally that I find really helpful. So the link that I'll put that on my website is www.charlottedune.com. And then I'll put it at charlottedune.com/help find the others, so that people listening to this specific episode can go to that link and be able to get the download for the reading list for what we're talking about, if that's okay with you guys.
Oh, absolutely. No, that's terrific.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
No, I definitely, I've gotten away from, I need to get back into reading more. And so like, I definitely, urge people to, increase their literary repertoire of what they read and stuff like that. And that's one reason I wanted to have you on to talk about your book. And I don't know if you've checked out, well, Rich, who's Dr. Richard Waterloo, who's been on our podcast a bunch, like on our Discord, he's always talk about what books he's reading and what's making him think and stuff like that. So I definitely like appreciate his input there to keep the psychedelic book club going on. And I don't like to keep it just to that. Like I like to expand, and read all different sorts of topics. So I'm always about that.
Oh yeah, and I have to give compliments to the Discord server because I'm not on it that much now, but when I first joined it, it was back when like the primary elections were really heating up. I was on there a lot, and I loved all the YouTube links and all the book links that people were sharing, and just seeing what everybody was up to and hearing about their little like weekend trips and trip reports. And I'm a big fan of reading people's trip reports. I don't know if there's some kind of personality trait where you just love reading trip reports, but I've got that one. It's like one of my favorite things to do is read about people's different crazy visions that they had or trips. So I really enjoyed the Discord server when I was first getting on there and checking that out a couple months ago.
Yeah.
So I go through periods where I try to cut down my amount that I'm messaging and like being on my phone for the sake of my family. So, but the Discord server is very cool. I'm glad you guys are doing that.
Yeah. Oh, I go through that too. Like that's what's hard is because like I really like the Discord server for me has become like the positive social media outlet that like what I want Facebook to be, but Facebook turns out to be the opposite of our Discord server for me. But it's it's an addiction. Phones and screens are an addiction, just like anything else. The dopamine release you get from notifications and text messages and all that stuff is just as addictive and just as damaging as anything else can be. And I'm the same way. Like I just have to take a break. Like I do this I'm lucky at work that I get, paid to walk in the woods, and I leave my phone behind, and so like
That's
every
good.
day I get like 2 hours at least of like, I couldn't look at my phone if I wanted to, um, but then like on the weekends and stuff like that, it'll be like, it's shitty. I put a screen limit timer on my kids' phones, but not my own. I mean, actually, I should just do that. But it's like, yeah, you'll just like, how many times can I refresh that page? Like, it doesn't matter. Just put your fucking phone down, or like there'll be some days, if it's a rainy like weekend day or something like that, like I'll actually have like an indentation on my finger where my phone's been, and it's like, oh my God, it's such an addiction that you just can't like, it takes just as much willpower as not drinking, well, not really, but I mean, it's such a habit, it's such a I don't know, it's terrible. And so um I don't blame you or anyone for being on the Discord and dropping out and coming back in. Like, that's what you got to do, like it can just get so addictive. And even if it's not the addiction to the screen, so much social media, whether it's positive or negative, it can take away your concentration so much. You get caught going down other people's rabbit holes, which can be interesting if you're bored. But if you're like, I gotta finish writing my book, or I gotta write that song, or like what, all these things that we're like, we want to spend time on our things, we can get stuck through social media on other people's things, other people's, obsessions and things that they think's interesting and stuff like that. And like, it's such a double-edged sword, because like, yeah, that if you're bored, or it can be eye-opening and you can learn something new, but at the same time it's such a distraction from the things we say we don't have enough time for. You like, how many times can you be like, oh my God, I just wasted 2 hours on Wikipedia because someone mentioned on Twitter, or something like that, and like, it's rough. So I definitely, phone breaks are definitely something everyone needs to take into account, for sure.
Yeah, my problem is like first thing in the morning, I'm really trying to break that habit. I have this
Mhm.
habit of just like wanting to look at my phone as soon as I wake up.
I
And
know.
it's almost like I need the light to wake me up or something. It's like I struggle to even get to my, coffee machine to make coffee before I've had my little like check of every single social media account I have. So
Yeah.
that's what I'm trying to break, but it's hard. I'll put the phone in a drawer and shut the drawer. And then
Yeah.
in my head, I'm like thinking about the phone. So it's a work in
Yeah.
progress, that one.
Oh yeah. And well, and my dumbass is like, my alarm clock is my phone. So to hit snooze on my alarm clock, I have to pick my phone up, and then by hitting snooze, I'll be like, "Oh, Stan texted me in the middle of the night. Let's see what that's about." And then, whatever. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, it's just stuff like that where it's like, come on. Like, right away, I got to be watching YouTube videos before I even, you know, get a cup of coffee in me. Like, but, yeah, it's tough.
Yeah.
And the quarantine stuff doesn't make it any easier, because it's like, well, I don't got nothing else to do. What the fuck. So yeah, I don't know. And then it's like, and I'm sure you can relate to this too, being a parent, but it's like, for me, it's like, I'm always trying to limit my kids' screen time and make them go outside and stuff like that. And they call me out on my hypocrisy all the time, and say the same things I say to them when they see that I've been on my phone for too long. They'll be like, "Oh, why don't you put your phone down and go outside, ride your bike?" Like the same stuff I tell them. And it's like, yeah, you're right. And
Yeah.
it's, you know,
I'm in the
I,
same boat. My daughter's like, you text all the time. Stop telling me to get off the iPad. You're
yeah,
always texting. I'm just like, no. But I will say that reading books really helps you stay away from the phone.
oh, yeah,
And it's a good habit to show in front of your kids. Like, I
oh,
always
yeah,
feel good when my daughter's just watching, even if she's on an iPad, if she's just watching me sit in a chair and read a book, I think I'm having some kind of positive
yeah,
impact on her. So I do try to read a book a week or a book every other week.
yeah, yeah. My wife's good
They're
about that.
short.
Yeah, yeah. My wife's good about that as far as the role model thing. Like, she reads a lot, so around the kids, and my son will read, and he reads on a Kindle, but it's better than just watching Fortnite on YouTube. And so, I mean, we are good like that. It's more, it was a big thing for me, like maybe like a year ago, like I was like reading all the time, like just not even finishing books. Like I was like constantly, like I'd have like 3 books I was working on at a time and stuff like that. And, yeah, I don't know what like got me off of it, but like, well, one thing is I've been studying for an arborist exam, so that's the only book that I've had, and it just gets boring, and like, so I don't want to read because like I should be reading that, and whatever. But it's a hard thing to get. It's just like meditation. It's like it's hard to get into, but then once you're into it, it's easy, and it's easy to fall out of it, and then hard to get back into it. But I do agree that like the times where I've been reading heavily, I've had less interest in my phone for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so yeah, we're at like an hour and a half. So your book, like, where can people find it? Is it,
Yeah.
you said you had a website. We can link that, but where's your book available?
The book is on Amazon. It's in paperback. It's in Kindle. It's, wherever you buy your books. And the audio version of the book is coming out next month at the end of the month. So right now it's just paperback and Kindle. But you can just search for Cactus Friends, A Psychedelic Love Story by Charlotte Dune, and you will find it.
Awesome. And did you do the recording for your audiobook?
I did do the recording for the audiobook, which afterwards I was like, I'll never be doing this again for any other books. No, it was fun, but it's a lot of work, and you never realize how much you breathe or how much you don't read smoothly. I thought I was going to be so good at it, and it was a challenge. Not so good at it, but I thought, oh, I can read just fine and it'll be good. But yeah, you really have to control your breath. It's an art. So next time it'll be the voice actors. But I know people like hearing authors read it too, so I was excited to do it. But
yeah, well,
it's
awesome.
Great.
Yeah. No, I definitely will check out the audio version and the paper copy. But
and
yeah,
be on Audible and Amazon, and should be in the library too. And if you don't see it in your library, you can request it on Overdrive, and that will put any book in your local library. So that's a good thing too. If you want to read it for free, just go in Overdrive and request it through their system, and then they'll bring the Amazon book to your library.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, yeah, thanks for reaching out. Thanks for listening to the podcast, and anytime you want to come back on and talk, reach back out and we'll get you back on here.
Well, thank you guys. You guys do such an amazing show and like such amazing work spreading the word, and also like making it easier for just everyday people to admit that we experiment with psychedelics. So
yeah,
I think it's so great.
Awesome. All right.
Taking away the stigma. Yeah,
for sure. As always, thank you for listening to the Help Find the Others podcast. Please don't forget to check out our Discord server to connect with our growing community. The link to join can be found in the description. And if you feel like donating to our channel to help us grow, a link to our Patreon can also be found in the description, as well as some cryptocurrency wallet addresses. If you would like to be a guest on the podcast or have any questions about these topics, please email helpfindtheothers@protonmail.com. If you would like to leave a voicemail or a text message question for a future episode, Stan, what's that number again?
567-233-1335.
Okay, guys, thanks again. And until next time, let's help find the others.